What is up, everybody? Welcome into the podcast. This is the finals week, and this is one of the final podcasts of the year for fantasy football. It's been an amazing year so far, guys. I've honestly grown so much in terms of my ability to do these things, I think, and my editing ability. And so, I'm thankful for the opportunity I've had to do this, to play in the fantasy football league, and just to have fun with you guys and improve a skill. And thanks to everyone who has joined the podcast this year. We've had Nick Dudo on the show. We've had also Adam Fuad come on. As we do this next year, we're not sure how the format is going to be, but we'd like to get more people on so people can, have fun, get in front of a mic, see what it's like to record a podcast like this, and just have a good time and just hang out with friends and talk fantasy football, boys. So just to start things off, wow, we've got the playoffs coming to an end. It's the finals, and it's going to be Nick DiBiase versus Max in the finals. Who would have thought, Nick DiBiase would get in there? Certainly, we thought Max could, as he was the top team, the number one seed of the year. The first round bye certainly helping him a lot. But just also to mention, guys, the reason I wear these sunglasses right now, I'm wearing sunglasses. I've worn sunglasses the last 2 times I've done the podcast. It's so that I can look at the screen, at the recording of me while I'm talking, and have it still look like I'm looking into the camera. So, if I'm looking at the video right now, it's tough for me. It looks weird, and it looks like I'm not talking to you guys. As opposed to looking into the camera like this, that's a lot better. It's like I'm talking to my audience. But if I have the glasses on, I can really do both and have it look like I'm actually talking to you guys. So it's a more enjoyable experience. So I hope you guys understand that. Obviously, I look really cool too with these glasses, to be honest with you. That was kind of a joke. But so anyway, getting to this week's podcast, it's been an insane season. Injuries, trades, everything going down. And we've all come down to the finals matchup, Nick DiBiase versus Max Fishman. And we're really just going to be talking about this matchup today. We're going to be talking about the kind of what's going on. Today is Saturday. It is a few hours before the first games of the day, or the game of the day. There's 2 games today. We have, I believe it's the Ravens and the Chargers later today. So, yes, we have this championship matchup today, and it's going to be such an interesting matchup to go forward and talk about, just because, Todd Gurley might not be playing in this game, and, that really does hurt Deebs. We have Todd Gurley listed as questionable right now. Let me just talk about the 2 teams right now. We've got Max Fishman's team, when she names your Johnson Jr. Well, whatever that means. It got Max into second seed this year in the playoffs, and it got him to the finals matchup with a great team. And it looks like he's going up against Deebs. The Girlies Gone Wild, with the beautiful Girls Gone Wild, VHS cover art here for DiBiase. Congrats to both these guys making the playoffs. And they both have a decent shot to win, although Deebs is fairly highly more out-projecting. He's out-projecting Max Fishman here. 117 for Deebs projected, 98 for Max. It's not totally a guarantee when you're out-projected your opponent, but it certainly does help a little bit. It means ESPN thinks you've got a better team. So that does not necessarily mean you're going to win, though. But let's look at the matchups one by one. So by quarterback, I'm going to give Deebs the clear advantage. Russell Wilson for Deebs, Baker Mayfield for Max. Obviously I would trust Russell Wilson in this game. He's going to be down against Kansas City. He's going to probably have to throw the ball a lot in this game. So lots of points for Deebs there, probably. Looking at Max's team, he's got no other quarterbacks right now, so Baker Mayfield is his only option. He's certainly hoping Baker Mayfield has a great game. His last 3 games haven't been too good. 13 points, and 11 points in the last 3 games. This week he's going up against Cincinnati. They're a below-average team. And from a defensive perspective, they've actually been doing a pretty good job against the quarterback in the last 3 games, giving up 10 points, 12 points, and 11 points respectively in the last 3 games. Whereas Kansas City against the quarterback have done much worse. 23 points, 17 points, and 18 points against quarterbacks in the last 3 games. So definitely liking Russell Wilson here in this quarterback matchup for Deebs. Max is going to need a good game from Baker. When we look at the running back perspective, we look at Todd Gurley, and right now there's a big Q, which is questionable by his name. So Sean McVay says that Gurley is going to be questionable and also going to be a game-time decision against the Cardinals. Obviously, you really want Gurley to play here, and I think Gurley playing is going to heavily swing the matchup because we look at Max's side for the running backs. He's got Dion Lewis and Dalvin Cook. And I will say this, Dalvin Cook had a hell of a game last week. 19 carries for 136 yards, 2 touchdowns, giving him just under 29 points for the day. Definitely his best performance of the season. And looking at Dalvin Cook when he's returned from his injury, he's been pretty solid. He did have a pretty bad 0.5 point total game against Chicago in week 11, but since then he's rattled off 15, 14, 16, and 28 in the last 4 games, going up against Detroit this week. And as a defense, Detroit, they're a decent team. They've had some struggles against the running back, and they've also performed well. Most of the season, they've given up tons of points on the ground. Let's look at the first 5 weeks. 31, 35, 21, 35, 19 for Detroit defense. But lately, they've been doing better. The last 6 weeks, 17, 14, 27, 30. But the last 2 weeks, 11 points against Arizona running backs. And in week 15, 10 points against Buffalo running backs. So they're on a good run right now, and from a defensive perspective, although that's liable to change going up against Dalvin Cook, who had an explosive game last week. Dion Lewis is Max's other running back, who is a pretty average player. He's been scoring below 8 points in the last 7 weeks, so you're not going to be too excited about it, although he's liable to bust off like a 20-point game. He has done it before in the season. He's had a few 18-point, 19-point games, but lately he's been doing poor, so I wouldn't expect much there. From Deeb's side, his other running back is Doug Martin, who is basically covering Dion Lewis, if not doing a little better. Doug Martin is liable to score a touchdown for the Oakland Raiders. He scored a touchdown in 3 of the last 4 weeks for the Raiders, so it's definitely going to be helping him here if Martin scores a touchdown. As you know, Martin tends to get around 50 to 60 yards, if not less, per game. So a touchdown really helps his point total there. Doug Martin with a pretty poor game last week against Cincinnati, only 3.9 points. This week he's going up against Denver, who Denver's got a decent run defense. They're ranked 12th against the run, so not the best, but not the worst by any means. So Deebs is liking his chances. It's all really dependent from a running back perspective on Todd Gurley playing. He's the game time decision on Sunday. It's a 1:05 Pacific kickoff time. All right, so we've gone over the quarterbacks and the running backs. Now let's talk about the wide receivers. Looking at Deeb's side, we've got Mike Evans and Jarvis Landry as Deeb's top 2 receivers. And we'll start off with Mike Evans, who is a kind of a boomer bust player. He can put up 25, 30 points, but he also can put up 5 or 10 points. And it looks like he's even put up 2 points one game this season. He had 1 reception for 16 yards. A little bit of concern for Mike Evans lately is that he hasn't scored a touchdown in his last 4 games, and in his last 3 games, he's only had 4 receptions. So with the low volume there, from a catch perspective, catch rate, you'd not expect him to do that much. However, he is going up against Dallas D. So Dallas D, bad news for Deebs. Dallas D is 3rd ranked in the defensive perspective against wide receivers. So Mike Evans could have a tough matchup this Sunday. He's playing at 10 a.m. in Dallas. Looking at Deebs' other wide receiver, Jarvis Landry. Now we know about Jarvis Landry. He's one of those guys that looks good on paper. He's getting balls thrown from Baker Mayfield better than he had before in the year with I forget his name. He was so bad. But the other guy, Tyrod Taylor. But, Jarvis Landry has been doing better this season. Midway through the year, he was putting up like 7, 8, and 3 points, and then 4 points. He had a bad stretch of games week 8 through week 12. But in week 13, he came back with a 13-point performance. That was 6 catches, 103 yards. So definitely not something to, be concerned about there. Week 14, he really stepped it up, scoring 22 points, and that was really helped by his rushing totals. He had 54 yards rushing in that game, so it really helped him there. Now, week 15 against Denver, 5 points for Jarvis Landry. So overall, Jarvis Landry, the 21st ranked receiver this year, he's really kind of a boomer bust guy. He's not someone you really feel comfortable putting in your wide receiver spot, but he can put up numbers. So Deebs is certainly hoping Jarvis Landry does well this week. He's going up against Cincinnati, and Cincinnati is the 18th ranked defense against wide receivers, so definitely a decent matchup there for Jarvis Landry. That game is being played at 10 a.m. on Sunday. So now let's look at the other side of the equation at Max's wide receivers. Now I'm going to give a clear advantage to Max here in wide receivers. DeAndre Hopkins is Max's wide receiver 1, who, as we know, is a star in the NFL. He's a stellar talent. He is the 3rd-ranked wide receiver. Last week, he had an absolute monster performance, 170 yards, 2 touchdowns, resulting in 34 points. If he gets that kind of performance from DeAndre Hopkins this week, we're going to probably be calling Max Fishman the champion of the league this year, and congrats to you if that happens, Max. So this week, he's going up against Philadelphia, but we do see a questionable designation here for DeAndre Hopkins, but he's expected to play against the Eagles, the Aaron Wilson of Houston Chronicle reports. So certainly DeAndre Hopkins could be hampered by this ankle injury, but if he's playing, he's got a chance to score touchdowns here. Taking a look at the Philadelphia defense, they are absolutely terrible. They are the 31st ranked defense against wide receivers, giving DeAndre Hopkins a huge possibility at a huge game this week. And really, this is probably where Max is going to score a lot of his points. This is a huge opportunity for Max to get a great lead in this matchup and really set himself apart from Deebs with DeAndre Hopkins. Now, his other wide receiver is Amari Cooper. Now, Amari Cooper is certainly an interesting player. He used to be on my team, in fact, but he's not anymore. He's on Max's after I dropped him to the waivers. Max picked him up immediately after for quite a bit of money. So Amari Cooper is definitely an interesting player, and you never know what you're going to get with him. The thing is that he can score a ton of points. This guy put up 44 points 2 weeks ago against Philadelphia. So now we do know that Philadelphia is quite a poor defense in the air, but he's going up against Tampa Bay again this week, who is the 27th ranked defense, similar to Philadelphia, and being in that bottom third of the league, being pretty poor defensively. So Amari Cooper could have a great game, but as some of you guys may know, Amari Cooper can put up very poor games as well. That's the reason why I dropped him. He had a stretch of scoring 1.5, 0, and 0 in weeks 5 through 7. Since he's been traded to Dallas, he's had some great games. He scored 34 points on Thanksgiving against Washington, who is a decent defense, I believe. And as I just talked about, he scored the 44 points against Philadelphia. But in between those two games, and also before that one and after the 44-point game, he scored 5 points in Week 11, 9 points in Week 13, and 6 points last week in Week 15. So it's really a boomer bust kind of thing for Amari Cooper. Not like DeAndre Hopkins, where we're pretty sure he's going to score a lot. But if Max can get DeAndre Hopkins going like we know he can, and Amari Cooper on his more boom side of a performance, it's really going to be tough for Deebs to come back, especially if Gurley isn't playing. So let's move on here. Before I move on, though, I just want to say I do give Max the edge from a wide receiver perspective. And before, I would say I do give Deebs the edge from a running back perspective if Todd Gurley plays. If not, then that is a different story. Now, I will say that looking at Deebs' bench, does he have options to play another running back? I think you'd probably go with Jeff Wilson Jr. for San Francisco, who would put up some decent games in Week 13 and 14, getting 15 and 23 carries, respectively in those 2 weeks. But we're going to have to see if Matt Breida is in. If Breida is in the game, I guarantee you Jeff Wilson is not going to get as much volume, and it's going to be tough for Deebs to have a good backup for Todd Gurley. But Deebs does have Zach Zenner, who's on Detroit, and it looks like Zach Zenner is kind of like one of these touchdown guys who's just he had 12 carries in Week 14 and 10 carries Week 15, but he scored a touchdown in each one of those, starting to get some volume later on in the season. If he scores a touchdown, it could be a good option. Certainly not Todd Gurley, though. His last option at running back, Deebs, is Darren Sproles, and really don't want to be playing Darren Sproles in a finals matchup. Last case scenario there, I think those are his 3 options from 1 through 3, Wilson Jr., Zach Zenner, and Darren Sproles. Hopefully he's crossing his finger that Gurley does play, and he should be at least by his phone at the game time for that Sunday night or the Sunday afternoon game against Arizona, the Rams against Arizona. All right, so now we've talked about quarterback, we've done running backs, and we talked about wide receivers. We don't have much to go, but we're going to talk about now the tight ends. And this really is a clear advantage for Nick DiBiase. Nick DiBiase's team is pretty much carried a lot this year by the number one tight end in the NFL, Travis Kelce of the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, I will say this. Kelce did not play very well last week against the Chargers, scoring only 9 points. And this week, he goes up against Seattle, who are middle of the pack from a tight end defense perspective. However, I will say this. It's more likely than not that the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be up in this game against Seattle, so they'll probably be using the run game. However, I do think that Travis Kelce is one of those guys that it's just not that big a deal, the game script for him. He's going to get targets. He's probably going to get receptions, and he's probably going to score points. So Deebs certainly has a clear advantage having the number one tight end who in the NFL from a fantasy perspective against Max, who really does not have much talent at all at that position. In fact, Max is playing the 39th ranked tight end in the NFL from a fantasy perspective this week. Is certainly a huge disparity from the worst to the best. Now, let's talk about Ian Thomas. Ian Thomas, I don't know about him. I do not want to be starting him, and it's really a last-ditch effort. Looking down at Max's team, he's got three other tight ends on his roster. He's even got Hunter Henry in his IR spot, but Dallas Goedert and Gerald Everett, tight ends for the Rams and Philadelphia. Now, to be completely honest with you, I kind of like Everett here as an option for tight end over Ian Thomas. I think that Everett could be a better play because he's going to be scoring potentially points. I mean, he's on the Rams. And Everett's a big guy. They really do like him. He's kind of the number one tight end there in LA for the Rams. They don't necessarily use tight ends a lot, but if they do happen to go to the tight end this game, Gerald Everett will certainly benefit from that, and so will Max Fishman. So I don't really know what the best option here from tight end is. However, I would lean towards Gerald Everett simply because he's on such a high-powered offense. The other tight end option that Max has is Dallas Goedert, and Dallas Goedert has a decent year. I mean, he's scored 4 touchdowns already. He's had some weeks where he's scored 16 points, another 12-point performance, and if he scores a touchdown, he's going to be scoring a decent amount of points. Certainly not Kelce status, though. So as we move on from this, I'm leaning towards Deebs in this entire matchup right now. We've talked about the running backs. We've talked about the receivers. However, Max certainly outplays Deebs from a wide receiver perspective. And if he can make up the difference there between his quarterback and his running back, Max is going to be looking like he's got a chance to win. So let's look at the flex plays now. Max has got Mike Williams, who had a monster game last week against Kansas City. And we're all looking to Mike Williams to see how he follows it up. I mean, this was a huge performance. He had, I think, 3 touchdowns total. He had 1 rushing and 2 receiving, and he just really was a game changer in this game. He was a reason why the Chargers upset the Chiefs in Kansas City. In total, Mike Williams scored 33 points last week, 7 receptions, 76 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And like I mentioned, he also had 1 rush for 19 yards and a touchdown. We all know that play. It was a pretty cool play. So Mike Williams was a former first-round draft pick, and it looks like Keenan Allen might be sitting in this game. So if he does, Mike Williams will continue to be that number 1 guy for Philip Rivers, most likely. Now, I will say this. Mike Williams is a bit of a boomer bust type player. So he has had a game with 0 points. He has had a game with 2 points, a game with 1 point. And, he has some games with 6 points mixed in there. But if he really follows up this performance he had last week and continues his ascension to the NFL as like a top wide receiver, he's really going to be, Max is really going to be happy about that. It's really going to be benefiting his team. So it's really kind of another boomer bust. There are a few boomer busts on Max's team right now. We're talking about Amari Cooper, Mike Williams. So really it could go either way. Max could be scoring a ton of points, or Max could be scoring a medium amount of points, which would not probably get the job done here in the finals. So looking at Deeb's side, from a flex perspective, Alshon Jeffrey. So Alshon Jeffrey is a good wide receiver. Well, he's ranked 28th right now as from a wide receiver perspective, but he's had good games. Week 4, after he sat out the first 3 weeks of the season, he scored 20 points against Tennessee. Week 6, he had 23. Week 7, 18 points. And in the last 2 weeks, week 14 and 15, he's had 14 catches for over 210 yards and a touchdown, 14 points in week 4 and 20 points in week 15. So good for Alshon Jeffrey. He's on the upswing right now, and it's going to be looking like against Houston, who we have to check about this, but Houston is a 9th ranked defense. However, in the last 3 weeks, they've given up quite a bit of points, 39 points against Cleveland, 47 points against Indianapolis and 31 points against New York in the Jets. I mean, in the last 3 weeks from a wide receiver perspective. So Alshon Jeffrey is potentially to have a good game. I mean, he's not going to be scoring lots and lots of points, but certainly a 15-point game for Alshon Jeffrey, Deebs will be happy about. Now let's talk about the defenses and the kickers. As we know, these actually can swing the matchups to a certain way depending on how they perform. And really what we're going to be looking at here is who they're going up against. So Deebs looks like he's starting Dolphins defense against Jacksonville, and they're actually a great team to play against. Jacksonville is one of the worst offenses in the league, and defenses against Jacksonville have averaged about 11 points per game over the last 5 weeks. So, if 11 points from the Dolphins if that happens, Deebs is liking it, and it certainly can help him win the championship. Now, on Max's side, we have the Chargers playing against Baltimore, and Baltimore isn't as bad as Jacksonville. Baltimore has given up probably about an average of 6 points over the last 5 weeks, so definitely a disparity there. The edge goes to Deebs from the defensive perspective. I would recommend to Max, if he has the opportunity, to look at the waiver wire and see if there's a streamer option that's available to play so he can get the better defensive matchup. Although I will say that the entire year, Max has been playing the Chargers D almost like as a rule, and so that might be, he might be just confident in them and might want to keep them going on. So lastly, look at the kickers. And obviously, I'm just going to go ahead and say this is a clear advantage to Nick DiBiase, who has Greg Zuerlein. I had Greg Zuerlein last year. I know he's just a game changer. He is Greg the leg. He rarely misses, and he scores lots of points because it's Greg Zuerlein, and also most likely because it's the Rams offense. The Rams offense puts their players in position to score, and certainly Greg Zuerlein gets lots of opportunities. Aldrick Rosas is Max's kicker, and he's had a pretty good year in the last 5 weeks. Now, he didn't play last week against Tennessee. I guess he didn't have any opportunities. I'm not sure if he played or not, but he didn't score any points last week. But the 4 weeks prior, he scored 10, 12, 15, and 10 points. So, that's good for your kicker perspective. Anything above like 8 or 9 points, you're happy about. So Deebs is certainly hoping he does score that amount of points. All right, guys, so that was the entire matchup. Now I'm going to give my pick for this game. I'm going to go with Max. I think his wide receivers, DeAndre Hopkins and Amari Cooper, are potentially going to go off, and if they do, he's probably going to find himself a win. The fact that Gurley is a game-time decision means they probably, and he might not play. I mean, they don't really need to play him against Arizona. And also, if he does play, he might be a little banged up. I mean, think about it. They're looking to win a championship. They're not wanting to win or run the score up against Arizona. So they might want to just rest their guy for this week. And if that happens, it certainly does not benefit Deebs, and it definitely helps Max. So, the one thing I will say is that Max is using Baker Mayfield as his quarterback. He might want to look to the waiver wire to see if he can find a better quarterback for this championship match. If not, he's going with his guy, and that's what he's going to do. I'm certainly not going to tell him what to do. He's done a great job managing this year. He's made it all the way to the finals, and he's now looking to win and cash in. Either way, both these guys are going to cash in the league. Congrats to both. May the best manager win, and hopefully you guys have some good luck. I do want to talk about one thing, though. If Deebs does win, I want to say that is a little bit of a asterisk. Nick Dudo really kind of took a bad L, or unfortunate L, just kind of a bad situation with the way that Nick DiBiase ousted him from the playoffs. Really Nick DiBiase is in the playoffs because a few managers, well, specifically I'll just say Ari, no offense to him, but he didn't really play his best lineup. And I understand that. I understand how that can happen. If you're no longer in the playoffs and you're no longer in the league, it's just kind of hard to dedicate time to it because we all have so much stuff we're doing. But Deebs did benefit from basically a very poor, if not negligent, managerial decision. Like I said, it's not that big a deal. I understand why, Ari may or may not have played his best team. It's tough to follow if you're not in the running, as I kind of found out, in the last couple weeks. But, so with that being said, the way that Nick got out, who's been really active and, passionate about this, I don't think it's very fair at all. Because really Nick could have had the opportunity, and he really could have, gone in there and changed the score for that one game that Nick DiBiase played against Ari, and that would have actually sent Nick DiBiase out of the playoffs and Nick Dudo in. So I'm not sure, how they would have done in the playoffs. Like, let's say, I don't know if Nick's team would have, won or whatever, but, based on how many points he was scoring. But I really do think if Deebs wins, I think the right thing for him to do, what he should do, I think he should help Nick out with his buy-in. Because really Nick did do him a solid by not, basically screwing him over. And by him not doing that, it really kind of hurt Nick in retrospective, looking back at it. So I would say that, Deebs, I'm talking to you. If you do win, as I've already kind of said to you before, but I feel like I mentioned it here as well. If you do win, I would recommend sending Dudo money for his buy-in, because it's really kind of it's just an interesting situation, and that would be the right thing to do. All right, well, that is it. That is the podcast. I certainly hope you guys enjoyed this week. This was a breakdown of the finals matchup. Everyone else, good luck in your final games. I'm going to set my lineup this week because I didn't really do that last week. It kind of messed me up. But, this has been a great year so far this year. I think we're going to have one more podcast coming up after the championship to kind of talk about year in review and maybe talk about stuff for next year. And then that will be it. So I appreciate you guys listening. I appreciate you guys, giving me good feedback in the beginning. Certainly, I feel like the views and the listens definitely dropped off, as we got along. But I do understand that, it's tough to kind of tune in every week. That's okay. But to the guys that do tune in, I really do appreciate you. Also, you guys who tuned in and we were able to go to that Rams game against the Chiefs, that was so much fun. Literally, that was one of the best nights of my life. It was so much fun doing that, honestly. And it was, I should say, it was one of the best football games I've ever been to. And it was just so much fun, dude. And I love doing stuff like that. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Good luck to Max and to Deebs in the playoffs and the finals. And we'll see you guys next week. And I hope you guys have a great week of football. Peace out.